This podcast is brought to you by Archimed, fast and focused design and manufacturing.
I'm Greg Maurer, founder and owner of Archimed.
And I'm Caroline Squattrigo, talent engagement specialist. We are on a journey to grow, learn, and gain expertise in small to mid-size company culture. Join us.
Okay, Caroline, what's the question of the day?
So today we are doing things a little bit differently. We have been asking these questions about culture just, in the office for, with me a few years. Greg, I think you've been doing it a little bit longer than
Yeah,
I
a
have.
few years longer.
Just a few years. And we've been doing this podcast for about a year and a half. So we thought it was a good time to reflect on kind of how far we've come, what we've learned. We started this journey with real questions and challenges that we were running into at work. And we wanted to find a way to connect with experts and document what we found. So we came up with this podcast. So, we've met some amazing people along the way. We have learned a lot from a lot of different people and seeing new and different perspectives on how to approach company culture. So I think we're going to call this our greatest hits episode and kind of do like a Rolling Stones greatest hits, but it'll be a little less exciting, I think.
Right. Maybe it'll be 2 albums, maybe 1. We'll see.
Maybe 2, maybe 1. We'll find out.
So,
Yeah.
I totally agree with everything you said. The whole point of this podcast is really the podcast was simply a tactic. Like the strategic item is the journey. So, as you mentioned, I'm trying to think about company culture for a long time. I understood its value and but felt like my whole life I've been prepared to address the strategic issues the company faces, but very little training and guidance as it relates to the cultural issues. So you and I sat down and said, well, we have all these questions. I have a bunch of questions. You have a bunch of questions. Let's go get them answered. And then we thought, okay, well, mostly you thought, okay, well, we might as well document this in the form of a podcast and see if what we learn can help other companies. So I think we started the podcast with a bunch of questions, and I think we learned a lot.
Yeah, we started to, not only did we have a lot of questions, we had some very basic, broad questions that we needed answered. And we really started from the ground up because we wanted to make sure, do we even have the right foundation in place to be looking at all of these deeper questions? So I think our first episode, it was literally, what is company culture? I think we talk about it a lot, but let's really dig in and define what it is. One of the biggest revelations from that episode for me was, culture doesn't have to be fostered. We're going to have it one way or another. And it can be really negative. It's not, we think about company culture when we're talking about building it, but it's there whether or not we want it or whether or not we've put any thought into it. And so that kind of laid the groundwork for us to know how important it is to put structure to it and to help it grow in the right way. And I think Randy Brown was the one that we talked to about that. And he had a lot of good insight, and he's done a lot with, building company culture, transitioning company culture. So he's really been in the weeds of it and was able to break it down for us so that we could start building our own knowledge around it.
Yeah. We definitely learned how important culture was. We obviously it was a priority to begin with because that's why we embarked on this journey. But guys like Randy Brown really highlighted how crucial it is to be a successful company. We definitely learned how culture happens whether you like it or not. And so as a consequence, we learned from that and we became more active in managing the evolution of our culture. So that was a change that you can identify in our company, that we took a more active approach. We also learned that you can't top-down culture. The top has a role to play, but the company culture and its formation and growth is best when it comes from the ground up. So as a consequence, we made another change, and we started to involve folks across departments from the top, middle, and bottom of the org chart to weigh in on our company culture, to bring ideas and to identify gaps and areas of improvement. So I think that learning produced a change in how we looked at things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started asking more questions to more people. And, we've learned how much people want to have a voice in culture, and how much, sometimes people may not be the person to go out of their way to come to us and ask for a specific initiative. But as soon as we're asking people what they want, they have feedback for us. And it's on us to listen to that and to help, give them the tools to implement whatever their idea is, or help improve on something if they think something could be a lot better. And I thought that was a fun one. And one of the tools we have to do that are our mission, vision, and values. And we knew that they related to culture, but we were like, are they culture? Are they separate? How do we think about this? And I think we landed, they're kind of like the structure, right? So when we talked about culture, we want it to be intentional so that we can help it grow in a healthy way. The mission, vision, and values help us do that, and they help us keep in mind how we want the company, what we want the company to focus on, what our mission is as a company, and then put values to that to help us get there. And I found that helpful to me, and that's something that John DeSalvo, who we've heard a lot from on this podcast, always says whenever we have a problem or a challenge, he brings people over to our values wall to figure out which one we're not abiding by, or we're not like holding respect for, right? Because typically it all comes back to our values and how we're interacting with them and engaging with them every day.
Yeah, this was a really interesting question for me, because mission, vision, and values is the establishment, and every company has them. And my question was, what do they have value, or are we just doing it because that's how it's been done? And we discovered that they do have value if you take them off the wall and put them into practice, like John does. And incidentally, 99% of the time, I think the value that's not being properly utilized is communication. For us, just as an aside, but boy, that's a big one. And speaking of John, we also learned that while culture is best from the ground up, leadership must walk the walk. So we made another change. We took our leadership team and put them in the process of culture development and evolution, cultural training, and we have more planned to get folks higher up on the communication scale and emotional quotient scale. That's all going to make them better leaders, so that they can walk the walk culturally and set the bar and set it high. And so when we learned how important it is, how often leaders are watched by others, we made a decision to involve them more and invest more in the leadership team as it relates to cultural competency.
Yeah, and when we talked about leaders too, I mean, of course you have your leaders who are built in, like your managers and your team leads, but then we have people who may not be in a role where they're technically leading people, but people look to them, right? We have people who are just natural leaders in the company. Every company is going to have people like that, who are good at gathering people and getting people behind one mission to help us achieve a goal. And so that was something where too, I think we were starting to recognize that more and bring people in to the fold more who maybe they don't have the title of a leader, but they clearly have the leadership style that can help bring people together and get their input on things. And maybe not everybody feels comfortable talking to us about their feedback that they have, but finding those people who really know what's going on, and getting the feedback somehow so that we can start implementing changes that people are looking for.
Yeah, the influencers.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you a millennial technically?
I think I am. People argue with me that I'm a Gen Z. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Gen Xer, and so the concept of an influencer is sort of foreign to us because we're
Yes.
not out there on the World Wide Web as often as the rest of you are in the Ethernet. Um, but yeah, we have people who have influence over coworkers, even if they don't have a org chart authority, and they may not have any direct reports, or they may only have a couple, but they have outsized influence because they have earned the respect and the trust of their coworkers. And so um, I think one change we made is we got a little bit away, rightfully so, from the org chart as it relates to, who can make change, and concentrated more on the person uh, as far as who can make change. So that was a mind shift for me, and I think for the company. Um, so I agree with what you said.
Yeah, and sometimes when we reach out to people, they they were always interested in being involved, which is totally okay. But then we found other people who did really want to be involved. And it helped us give that direction to people who maybe weren't seen before as somebody in the loop on some of these culture things. And, I think it's really fun when you find the people who are invigorated about it, because they have all these ideas that, I would never think of. And they're so creative. And so it's really fun to work with people and bring that excitement back into things.
Yeah, agreed. Um, we also learned about, what is our goal culturally. And there's this trend in society, be happy and pursue happiness, and that's the goal. But we dived, we went a little deeper to try and figure out whether happiness was our goal. And what we learned was that happiness was more of a fleeting feeling, and that it's great to be happy, but if you show up to work every day, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day or more, you're not going to always be happy. And so if that was our cultural goal, then it would be a tough one. And it's fleeting, and there's a lot of other inputs that can affect that. So we settled on something that's more foundational and longer lasting: fulfillment. So I think we hope our employees are happy, but one thing we did is we shifted our focus to providing an opportunity for, or an environment that fosters fulfillment. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, happiness is a mood, right? And
Hmm.
I always want people to be able to feel like they can be their genuine selves at work. And there could be something, whether it's at work or outside of work, that's bringing you down a little bit. And I think, we don't want to tell people you have to be happy when you're in this building. You can have whatever feelings you're having, but I think if people are at the end of the day fulfilled with their work, then that keeps the focus, that keeps them, like mission oriented on what they're doing, and lets them invest themselves in that work. I can tell you, I have had days where I'm tired, I'm maybe a little cranky. I might maybe I'm getting a lot of input, and sometimes I have to take some time to decompress. And then, but if anyone were to ever ask me if I love my job, even in the middle of everything, I'd be like, yeah, this is my favorite job. I love this job. I could be so angry, but I love this job. And that has nothing to do with my happiness in any given moment. And I think that's more important, because there's also probably people working jobs where they can be happy all the time, but do they really love their work? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. That's a guess. But if we can provide people the environment that they can find fulfillment in what they do and have input in everything that they're doing, and feel like they add value to the organization, then I mean, that's a win in my book, if we can give that to people.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things that give us the most fulfillment in life aren't always consistently enjoyable. I think about some philanthropic endeavors, where you need to make difficult decisions and um, take on different types of responsibilities or executive changes, and it's not always fun, but it's fulfilling because you're making a lasting difference. Parenthood, you know, uh, the most fulfilling of all endeavors, is not always so fun. And so it'd be naive and silly for us to think that a fulfilling job will always be enjoyable and fun. We hope it's predominantly enjoyable, but it's silly to think that it would be 100% of the time. We also learned from what you mentioned. You mentioned that we want people to bring their authentic selves to work. So we had an episode about being more human, didn't we?
Yes, this was one of my favorite episodes because one, it was really fun to record. It was just a really good time, in my opinion, at least, because I felt like I could be myself, on the podcast. I felt like I could be myself and I could bring who I am to the podcast, which did take some time, I will say. I don't know about you, Greg, but it's an interesting thought to have, so when we spend 40 hours a week at least at work and with our coworkers, um that's a lot of time to not be yourself or to try to we talk about happiness, to try to always be happy, to try to always be something that you think you need to be. And I think there's a way to bring your authentic self and marry that with like respectable, like office, whatever the culture is and expects from you. But you can be who you are at work. And I think for one, it's really freeing. It takes a lot less energy. So you can put energy into more creative things, like projects that you're working on. And then you just get to know each other better and it's more enjoyable, which I think just helps overall with the fulfillment side of work. I would imagine if I felt like I had to put on a face every day that I went to work, that it would be tiring. It'd be really draining. And I think giving people the environment to be who they are, it just opens up the door for all of these other things that people feel empowered to do and say and build trust with their team and then implement these great projects.
Yeah, and it's great to get to know our colleagues as people, not just as workplace bots that we walk by but don't acknowledge, but that they're people, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's good to be authentic. Now, like you said, you can't bring 100%. Let's say you like to drop f-bombs, every time you open your mouth. Well, you're going to have to maybe leave that at home, but predominantly be your authentic self. And it helps us once we understand that the authenticity of our colleagues, we can sort of take a look at what drives them, which was another episode we have. We were trying to figure out how the generations drive behavior, but it wasn't. We learned something there that it wasn't quite the generations, right?
No, I mean, Lindsay really schooled us, which is what I hope from all of our guests, to be clear, because I think we go into it knowing that we are not the experts. But, we were coming at it from are all these generations really this different? And, she brought up essentially these are all stereotypes, right? That we've all bought into. And we've said if you're born from, this year to this year, then you must be lazy. Like we're talking about millennials, since I'll identify as a millennial and pick on us. We must be lazy. We're obsessed with our phones. We want everything handed to us. All we want is avocado toast, but we complain about not being able to afford a house, whatever. And it really, when you get down to the core of who somebody is and how they interact and what they need, um, whether it's the workplace or their personal lives, for us, the workplace, it has a lot more to do with how they were raised, the environment that they were raised in. She let us in on some of her favorite questions to ask people. One of them was, what did the dinner take? What was eating dinner like when you grew up? What did that look like? Was it something on the fly? Did you sit down and have like a family meal? And that might give you some insight into how people operate and what they expect from, their leadership.
Yeah, I thought that was a fascinating discussion, and it's more equitable to not paint everybody with some broad brush based on a 40-year period during which they happen to be born. So it's not so much when they were born, but where and under what circumstances. And I found that to be fascinating, and it really highlighted for me why I have some behaviors that I have, based on the environment in which I grew up.
What are your behaviors, Greg?
Well, I I have a lot of family dinners growing up, and that's when a lot of discussion happened. You get to know your siblings and your parents get to know you, as children, but as people. So I adopted that, even though most of my generation, if you look at the houses that are new builds right now, there's not a lot of dining rooms anymore. But yet I still hooked onto that as something of value to me. And a lot of my contemporaries are just racing around from baseball fields to soccer fields during dinner time. Um, I also I'm a bit of a hard driving personality, and I think that's the environment in which I grew up. That it was expected that you define success for yourself and then pursue it and achieve it. And that was that. So that came not from what generation I was born in. In fact, if anybody would say what kind of generation that looks like, it would probably be a baby boomer characteristic. And so, but my baby boomer parents, instilled that in me.
Yeah, I think I was raised a little bit more like a baby boomer too, if you
Hmm.
just given my own parents' style. And I know a lot of my peers, I had the sit down dinner thing too, but a lot of my peers didn't growing up. I had to ask permission to leave the dinner table. I had to get it
Wow,
from,
that's old
I mean,
school.
and you had to get it from both parents. So, like, if mom felt like you were good, but dad was like, you have not fulfilled your duties here.
Yeah.
So, then I'm like, is that why I needed permission to do everything when I started working at Archimed? Who knows? But yeah, so it has an impact.
And that's the thing that when they say, "Do you mind if I leave the meeting?" That could be because they were conditioned to do that, to ask that question.
Yeah.
And so that's when
Yeah.
that was like the big shining light. The light bulb went off when we said, "Oh, okay, I get why you're asking me this question that I never would ask," for example, and it does explain a lot.
Well, and I think like when we're trying to understand people, a lot of times when somebody exhibits a behavior that we don't understand, um, I'll speak for myself. I have a tendency to be like, oh, that's so annoying that they do that. Maybe I jump to that. Whereas now that we've gone through this podcast, I'm like, okay, wait, there's a reason. Like, there's a reason they're not doing this to be annoying. No one's doing something, or I shouldn't say no one. Most people are not doing things intentionally to be annoying, and there's probably a reason why. And maybe if we get to know them a little bit more on a human level, then that'll just improve our work life that much more.
Yeah,
So it really is important to know who you're working with.
yeah. There's somebody that works for us that every time I approach them, they turn white in the face, and I would surmise that their upbringing, when authority approached them, was not always so pleasant. As an example, I'm taking a leap here, but um, I can understand that it's not so much about me, but maybe about them and the conditions in which they grew up, and now how they're conditioned to respond to certain stimuli. Um, you also mentioned trust, so we learned a lot about that, didn't we?
Yes. So I don't think it was a shock to us, that trust is important. I think it was more, how important is it and how do we build it? And so we talked a lot about, for one, if you don't have trust, you're dead in the water. You're not really going anywhere. So trust is one of those foundational things that you really need to be successful in any arena, including in the workspace. We need to feel like we can share our ideas, and whether or not everyone agrees with them, trust that no one's going to like jump on you and say that's such a terrible idea, why would you ever think of that, or don't share ideas. We need to have a base level of trust where we can have communication and not like have a fear of what's going to happen with what we say. um so I think that was number one. And then the second, as far as how to build trust, I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but I think it's really as simple as doing what you say you're going to do. And that takes time to build. But the more you do it, the more trust will build. And then, the greater your relationships get with everyone. And it's, leaders walking the walk, not just, not just getting on their soapbox and talking about how great everything is, but then, actually doing the work to make sure that everything's running smoothly. I think being in the weeds with people, we call it like walking the floor, because it's literally what we want our leaders to do. You can't be up in your office, with your door closed, inaccessible. You need to be around the office, especially our shop floor, and know what's going on. And I think that alone builds a lot.
Yeah.
So that people know that we're all in this together. We have the same goal,
Yeah, you mentioned it's hard to build trust. It takes time, and it does, but it sure is easy to lose it. And
Yes.
and the other concept was how trusting your employees is just good business. It is. Uh, I can't imagine feeling the need to establish a police state at our company to monitor the movements of our employees and how often their eyes flicker from one screen to another. There are companies that literally measure how often you move your mouse. Um, I just think that's a ridiculous waste of time and such an unpleasant way to go through life. So it's good business, and it's the right thing to do to trust your employees rather than employ some sort of police state to watch over them.
Well, and it frees up all this time, like one of the biggest, I think, like learning curves coming into Archimed is, our managers, their job is to manage people, right? But they also have this entire other job on top of it. Like that's not their sole role. And because of that, they don't have time to be micromanaging people and constantly monitoring people. And that's what I've always said. Micromanagement doesn't work for us. It's a waste of everybody's time. And so we bring you in because we trust you, and let's see how you apply the skills that you've learned and now can bring to Archimed. And some people love it. Some people take a while to adjust. Some people don't trust that we're really saying what we mean. They're like, when are you going to be standing over me? Like, never. It won't happen.
I got other things
Um,
to do.
yeah, I'm like, I'm too busy for that.
Yeah,
Let me know if you need me, but I'm not going to stand right next to you the whole day. So
yeah.
it's an
Not
interesting one.
not only so trust is sort of a microcosm of culture writ large, in the sense that trust is more easily established, but once you lose it, it's hard to put it back together. And we learned that culture is more easily managed than it is fixed. And so, what was the lesson? So knowing that, what is our instruction?
I mean, don't mess it up, for
Don't
one.
mess it up. Well,
No,
you use it.
let's go back to our one episode that
Yeah,
my mom was appalled with. Don't fuck up the culture. It's
exactly.
it's
Yes.
as simple as that. No, I mean, I think there's room for mistake. I think the most important thing is that people, one, when you make a mistake, own up to it. And I think the losing trust is not so much in making the mistake, it's in how you respond to it, right? So if you make a mistake and you blame it on everyone else, or you're the manager and your department as a whole has a misstep, the worst thing you can do is say, "Oh, it was this employee that did it." No, it was the entire department. You just say, "Look, we messed up. We're going to get to the root cause and we're going to figure it out." And I think keeping things process oriented when you're looking at any time there's a mistake, and owning up and then looking for the solution, best thing you can do. And it's the same thing when we're looking at culture. We're not always going to have the best initiatives. We're going to do everything we can to do that for people. But we've had initiatives that have not people have not been enthusiastic about, and then we move on, right? We say that's the feedback. We can
Yeah.
tell people don't like it. We're going to move on.
Now, for the record, we also have an initiative that's working well.
We do.
That
Greg likes
that was
this one.
brought up. It was brought up by me years ago, and then poo-pooed. Then brought up by one of our esteemed guests, and
Yes.
undertaken with gusto by you and your colleagues. The lunch
Hmm.
program.
The lunch program.
So
It
going
has
on
gone very
record.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, going on record.
People love
Um,
it.
yeah, I do too. Um, so we're coming on sort of the end of our usual length of podcast. So maybe we need a part two to cover the rest of our um, learnings and highlights.
Yeah, I
What do you
think
think?
so. I think we're moving into a part 2 here.
Yeah. So
So,
listeners, stay tuned for the next episode drop, where we cover the balance of our learnings to date.
That is it for this episode, everyone. As Greg mentioned, we will be releasing a part 2. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks.